What happens when a late-night talk show host pushes too far and a royal guest decides he's had enough? Tonight we're diving into one of the most explosive television moments ever captured, where Prince Harry found himself in a heated confrontation with Seth Meyers that ended with security escorting the Duke of Sussex right off the stage. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a full-blown argument that had viewers questioning everything they thought they knew about both men. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this all unfolded. The Late Night with Seth Meyers studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Prince Harry made his entrance through the guest corridor. The audience erupted in applause as he walked toward the interview area, waving with that familiar royal charm that had made him a media darling for years. Seth Meyers stood up from behind his desk, extending his hand with a broad smile. "Your Royal Highness, welcome to Late Night," Seth said, his voice carrying that signature blend of humor and respect that had made him a beloved host. "Please, just Harry," the prince replied, shaking Seth's hand firmly. "And thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this." The two men took their positions, Harry settling into the guest chair while Seth returned to his spot behind the desk. The cameras rolled, capturing what everyone expected to be another charming celebrity interview. The audience was primed for laughs, royal anecdotes, and perhaps some lighthearted discussion about Harry's various charitable endeavors. "So Harry," Seth began, leaning forward with that casual interviewer posture, "you've been making quite a name for yourself here in America. How are you finding life on this side of the pond?" Harry smiled, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed both nervous and practiced. "It's been an adjustment, certainly, but Meghan and I are building something beautiful here. We're focused on our family, our work, and making a positive impact." "That's wonderful," Seth nodded. "And speaking of positive impact, you've been quite vocal about various causes: mental health, veterans issues, climate change. But I have to ask, and I hope you don't mind me being direct here, some people feel like you've been perhaps a bit too vocal about certain family matters." The studio fell noticeably quieter. Harry's smile flickered for just a moment, but he maintained his composure. "I think it's important to speak your truth, Seth. When you've experienced trauma, when you've seen how institutions can protect themselves at the expense of individuals, staying silent isn't really an option." Seth leaned back slightly, sensing the shift in energy but pushing forward anyway. "Right, but there's speaking your truth, and then there's airing dirty laundry on a global stage. Some might say you've crossed that line a few times." The prince's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry. Are you suggesting that sharing my experiences of racism, mental health struggles, and family dysfunction is somehow inappropriate? Because I'd argue that silence is what allows these problems to continue." No, I'm not saying it's inappropriate." Seth backpedaled slightly, but his journalist instincts kept impressing. "I'm just saying that maybe there's a way to advocate for change without throwing your family under the bus so publicly. I mean, your grandmother just passed away, your father is dealing with cancer, and you're out here talking about how terrible they all are." Harry's entire demeanor shifted. His shoulders squared, his voice dropped lower, and his eyes narrowed with an intensity that made the studio audience collectively hold their breath. "Excuse me? Did you just suggest that I've been disrespectful to my grandmother's memory?" Seth realized he might have stepped too far, but the live television format left him no choice but to continue. "I'm just saying that timing matters, Harry. The optics of some of your recent statements, while your family is going through genuine crises, it looks a bit opportunistic." "Opportunistic?" Harry's voice rose slightly, and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You think I'm profiting off my family's pain? You think I enjoyed watching my wife contemplate suicide while my family did nothing? You think I wanted to leave everything I've ever known?" The tension in the room was palpable now. Seth's usual comedic timing abandoned him as he found himself in the middle of a genuine confrontation with a member of the British royal family. "Harry, I think maybe we should take a step back here." "No, let's not take a step back," Harry said, his voice steady but filled with controlled anger. "You invited me here, you asked the questions, and now you're going to hear the answers. You want to talk about opportunistic? Let's talk about how the British press hounded my mother to death and then tried to do the same thing to my wife. Let's talk about how my own family leaked stories about me to protect other family members. Let's talk about how speaking up about abuse is somehow worse than the abuse itself. Seth glanced toward his producers off camera, clearly looking for guidance on how to handle the situation. Harry, I understand you're passionate about this, but maybe we can find a way to discuss these issues without getting so heated. Heated? Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. You haven't seen Heated yet, Seth. You want to sit there in your comfortable American studio and judge decisions you could never understand. You want to question my loyalty to a family that showed me none. You want to suggest I'm being disrespectful while they literally tried to destroy my reputation to save their own. The audience was now completely silent, witnessing what was clearly no longer an interview but a full confrontation. Seth's usual quick wit seemed to have abandoned him entirely as he struggled to regain control of the situation. Look, I didn't mean to upset you, Seth said, his voice taking on a more conciliatory tone. I was just trying to present different perspectives that some people might have. Different perspectives? Harry stood up from his chair, towering over the desk. Whose perspective, Seth? The same media that killed my mother? The same establishment that tried to silence my wife? Or are these your own perspectives that you're too cowardly to own? Seth remained in his chair, but his body language showed he was clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. Harry, please, let's just take a breath here. We're on live television. Oh, now you're concerned about being on live television, Harry shot back. Where was that concern when you decided to ambush me with loaded questions and accusations? You think because you're behind that desk you can say whatever you want without consequences? The prince began pacing slightly, his energy filling the small studio space in a way that made everyone present acutely aware of the tension. You know what the real problem is, Seth? People like you think you can profit off our pain, ask invasive questions about our trauma, and then act surprised when we respond with genuine emotion instead of media-trained platitudes. Copy published Seth's face flushed red as he finally stood up from behind his desk, matching Harry's confrontational energy. You know what, Harry? You're right. Let me own my perspective then. I think you've become exactly what you claim to hate. You've turned your family drama into a brand, a Netflix series, a book deal, and now you're here promoting whatever project comes next. How is that any different from the media circus you say destroyed your life? The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath, wondering if this was about to become physical. How dare you? Harry said, his voice now a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. How dare you compare my attempts to control my own narrative with the vultures who stalked my family for profit? But that's exactly what you're doing, isn't it? Seth pressed, emboldened by his decision to stop pulling punches. You're stalking your own family for profit. Every interview, every documentary, every book chapter is another invasion of their privacy, another betrayal of their trust. At least the paparazzi are honest about what they're doing. Harry took a step closer to the desk, his presence now genuinely intimidating. You think telling the truth about abuse is the same as perpetrating it? You think holding people accountable for their actions is equivalent to harassment? That's the most twisted logic I've ever heard, and I've heard some truly twisted things in my life. Seth wasn't backing down now, his own anger finally matching Harry's intensity. Truth? Is that what you call it when you cherry-pick private conversations, twist context, and present one-sided narratives to make yourself look like the victim? Because, from where I'm standing, it looks a lot more like revenge than truth-telling. Revenge? Harry's voice cracked with emotion. You think losing my country, my family, my identity, my military titles, everything I worked for my entire life, you think that was revenge? You think watching my wife get death threats while pregnant was revenge? You think having to raise my children away from their cousins and grandparents was some kind of victory for me? The raw pain in Harry's voice seemed to give Seth pause, but he'd committed to this confrontation now and couldn't find a way back. But you chose all of that, Harry. Nobody forced you to leave. Nobody forced you to do the interviews or write the book. You made those choices, and now you want sympathy for the consequences? I chose survival, Harry shot back, his voice rising again. I chose protecting my family over protecting an institution that was actively destroying us. And yes, I chose to speak publicly because private conversations with these people accomplished nothing. They only respond to public pressure, and apparently, so do talk show hosts who think they can psychoanalyze situations they know nothing about. Seth moved around his desk now, closing the distance between them. You know what I think, Harry? I think you've convinced yourself that you're some kind of whistleblower, some heroic figure exposing corruption. But really, you're just a privileged man who didn't get his way and decided to burn down everything around him rather than take responsibility for his own choices. The studio audience gasped audibly at Seth's words. Even his own production team looked shocked at how far their host was pushing this confrontation. Harry stared at Seth for a long moment, his breathing heavy, clearly struggling to maintain any semblance of composure. Take responsibility? Harry's voice was barely controlled now. You want me to take responsibility for being born into a system that treats people as chess pieces? For falling in love with someone they deemed unacceptable? For having the audacity to prioritize my mental health and my family's safety over their public image? No, Seth replied, his own voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. I want you to take responsibility for the way you've handled it, for the way you've weaponized your trauma, for the way you've turned personal pain into public entertainment. You've become everything you say you despise. Harry's composure finally shattered completely. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to be trapped in that system, to watch it destroy everyone you love, to realize that the only way to survive is to expose it for what it really is. You think this is entertainment for me? You think I enjoy reliving the worst moments of my life for strangers like you? Then why do you keep doing it? Seth demanded. Why are you here, Harry? Why are you on my show, on every show, telling the same stories over and over again? If it's so painful, if it's so traumatic, why do you keep putting yourself through it? The question seemed to stun Harry into momentary silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, more vulnerable but also more dangerous. Because people like you refuse to listen any other way. Because the truth only matters if it's loud enough to cut through the noise. Because silence is what they're counting on, and I won't give them that satisfaction. Seth crossed his arms, his stance becoming more defensive. Or because you've discovered that victimhood pays better than royalty ever did. Face it, Harry, you've found your niche. Professional grievance is your brand now, and business is good. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: hurt, rage, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like pity. You really believe that, don't you? You really think someone would choose this life, this constant scrutiny, this endless judgment, for money? You think I wanted to become a cautionary tale? I think you've learned to profit from it, Seth replied coldly. And I think you've gotten very good at playing the victim while victimizing others. Your family, your former friends. Anyone who won't validate your version of events becomes fair game for public humiliation. Harry laughed, but it was a bitter sound that made several audience members visibly uncomfortable. My version of events? Seth, these aren't opinions or interpretations. These are facts about my life that I lived through. But sure, let's pretend that your perspective as an outsider looking in through tabloid headlines is somehow more valid than my lived experience. Your lived experience filtered through years of therapy, ghostwriters, and media training designed to make you look sympathetic? Seth countered. How much of what you're selling is actually you, Harry, and how much is just another carefully crafted public relations campaign? The question seemed to physically stagger Harry. He took a step back, his eyes wide with something that looked like genuine shock. You think this is an act? You think I'm performing grief, trauma, and displacement for your entertainment? You think someone taught me how to fake losing everything I've ever known? Seth's expression remained hard, unmoved by Harry's obvious distress. I think you've gotten very comfortable in the role of the wronged prince. And I think you'll say whatever it takes to maintain that narrative, even if it means destroying other people's reputations in the process. Harry's face went completely white, then flushed with a rage that seemed to transform him into someone entirely different. Destroying reputations? His voice was now a roar that filled every corner of the studio. What reputation am I destroying, Seth? The reputation of people who stood by while my wife was driven to contemplate suicide? The reputation of an institution that briefed against us to save face? What exactly am I destroying that wasn't already rotten to the core? Seth seemed startled by the intensity of Harry's reaction, but pressed on regardless. You're destroying your father's reputation while he's battling cancer. You're destroying your brother's reputation while he's trying to support his family through his wife's health crisis. You're destroying the reputation of an institution that millions of people around the world still believe in and respect. Good, Harry said, the single word delivered with such venom that several audience members actually recoiled. If their reputations were built on lies and cover-ups, then they deserve to be destroyed. If the institution's credibility depends on silence about abuse, then it deserves to fall. You want me to protect people who refuse to protect me? You want me to preserve a system that nearly killed my wife? Seth's voice rose to match Harry's volume. I want you to show some basic human decency. I want you to consider that maybe, just maybe, your perspective isn't the only one that matters. I want you to stop weaponizing your pain to hurt people who can't defend themselves publicly. Can't defend themselves? Harry was incredulous now, his gestures becoming more animated and aggressive. They have the entire British press machine at their disposal. They have centuries of tradition and protocol protecting them. They have teams of lawyers and public relations experts crafting their image. What exactly do I have that they don't, besides the truth? You have the American media eating out of your hand, Seth shot back. You have celebrity friends amplifying every word you say. You have streaming platforms and publishers throwing money at you for more royal secrets. You've got plenty of weapons, Harry, and you're using all of them. Harry stepped even closer to Seth, now close enough that the cameras caught every detail of his furious expression. Royal secrets? Is that what you call a son talking about his father's emotional unavailability? Is that what you call a husband describing his wife's suicidal thoughts? These aren't state secrets, Seth. They're human experiences that happen to involve famous people. They're private family matters that you've chosen to make public for profit. Seth replied, standing his ground despite Harry's intimidating proximity. And every time you do it, you hurt people who love you but can't fight back without looking petty or vindictive. Love me? Harry's laugh was harsh and bitter. Where was that love when I needed it most? Where was that love when my wife was being torn apart by their press? Where was that love when I was struggling with my mental health? They only love the version of me that stays quiet and plays by their rules. Seth's expression hardened further. Maybe because the version of you that speaks up has become vindictive, selfish, and completely consumed with your own grievances. Maybe they're protecting themselves from someone who's proven that nothing is sacred, no conversation is private, and no relationship is safe from being turned into content. The accusation seemed to hit Harry like a physical blow. For a moment, he looked genuinely hurt, vulnerable in a way that made the hostile energy in the room even more uncomfortable. But then his expression hardened again, colder than it had been all evening. You know what, Seth? You're right about one thing. I have learned that nothing is sacred when it comes to protecting my family. No relationship, no tradition, no institution is more important than the safety and well-being of my wife and children. And if that makes me selfish in your eyes, then I'll wear that label proudly. Seth shook his head, his own anger now matching Harry's intensity. What you're wearing is victim's clothing that doesn't fit you anymore, Harry. You've got more privilege, more resources, and more platforms than almost anyone on Earth, but you still want to be treated like a powerless victim. It's pathetic. The word pathetic seemed to be the final straw. Harry's entire body tensed, his hands shaking with rage. Pathetic? You want to see pathetic, Seth? Pathetic is a talk show host who thinks he's a journalist. Pathetic is someone who profits off celebrity drama while pretending to have moral authority. Pathetic is attacking someone's trauma responses because it makes for good television. At least I'm honest about what I do for a living, Seth replied coldly. I'm an entertainer who asks questions for entertainment. You're a former royal who's turned family destruction into a career while pretending it's activism. Which one of us is really the fraud here? Harry's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than all his shouting. You have no idea who you're talking to, Seth. You think this is a game, but you're playing with someone who has nothing left to lose. I've already lost my family, my country, my identity. What exactly do you think you can take from me that hasn't already been taken? Seth seemed to realize for the first time that he might have pushed too far, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. Your credibility, Harry. That's all you have left, and you're destroying it yourself with every interview like this one. People are starting to see through the act. The act? Harry was incredulous again. You think this is an act? You think I'm performing right now? Then let me give you a performance worth remembering. Before anyone could react, Harry reached across Seth's desk and swept his coffee mug, papers, and pen holder onto the floor with a crash that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. There's your performance, Seth. There's your entertainment. Are you happy now? Seth stepped back, clearly startled by the sudden physical escalation. Harry, you need to calm down right now. Calm down? Harry's voice was now hoarse from shouting. You spend an entire interview attacking my character, questioning my motives, and dismissing my pain, and now you want me to calm down? You got exactly what you wanted, Seth. You got your viral moment. Security personnel began moving toward the interview area, but Harry noticed them before they could get close. Don't worry, I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to overstay my welcome in this temple of journalistic integrity. Seth watched as Harry stormed toward the exit, his own face flushed with anger and what might have been embarrassment. Harry, wait, we can end this professionally. Harry turned back one final time, his expression a mixture of rage and disgust. Professionally? There was nothing professional about this ambush, Seth. You wanted to play with fire, and now you're surprised that you got burned. Enjoy your ratings boost. As Harry disappeared through the studio exit, followed by security personnel, Seth stood alone on his set, facing a stunned audience and equally shocked production team. The silence stretched for several long seconds before Seth finally returned to his desk, stepping carefully around the debris Harry had created. Well, Seth said, his voice shaky as he tried to regain some composure, that certainly wasn't how I expected this evening to go. The audience remained silent, unsure whether to applaud, laugh, or simply sit in the uncomfortable aftermath of what they'd witnessed. Seth looked directly into the camera, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. We'll be right back after this break, he managed to say, though his voice betrayed how rattled he truly was by the confrontation. As the cameras stopped rolling, the full weight of what had just transpired began to settle over everyone in the studio. What had started as a routine celebrity interview had devolved into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory, leaving both men's reputations fundamentally altered and raising questions about the limits of public discourse that would be debated for months to come. So there you have it, one of the most shocking celebrity confrontations ever caught on camera. What did you think about Harry's reaction? Was Seth's questioning justified, or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more unbelievable celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.